And as the bells chime one last time, good morning and welcome to this, the last meeting of the Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee, 23rd of March 2022, before the local elections in May. I'd let you know at this point this Area Committee meeting will be recorded on Teams and that this recording will be available online shortly after the finish of the meeting. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off video when you're not addressing the meeting. If you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you'll be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should a previous speaker raise your question or issue, please withdraw your request so we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. Usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This will allow us to monitor member presence. That takes us on to the cedrant and apologies and my approval of members' remote participation. Tracy, would you be able to give us a detail on the cedrant and apologies and which members are in the room and who isn't? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. We've got 6 members present, 1 member present in person at Annandale Town Hall being the Chair and 5 members present on Microsoft Teams. We've got 2 apologies from Councillor Fairbairn and Councillor McClelland, and 3 members not present is Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Karen Crothers and Councillor Ronnie Tate. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so we'll take that as a no. And we can move on then to the minute of the previous meeting of 24th of November. Are we happy to approve those minutes?
Agreed.
Thanks, Archie. That takes us on to item 4, which is Scottish Fire and Rescue Services 6-monthly performance update for the period April 2021 to 30th of September 2021. So Lucy Donaldson, I believe, is on Teams to answer any members' questions or address any member comments. Personally, I'm pleased to see much of the information in the report is disaggregated to Annandale and Eskdale area level, and it's pleasing to note that the combined appliance availability figure for Annandale and Eskdale remains at over 87%. The report highlights the growing need to maintain the number of firefighters available during the working day, as it remains the busiest time for call-outs, and I'm wondering if there's any specific circumstances associated with Gretna and how this level of availability is impacting locally. I don't know if you want to come in at this point, Lucy, maybe to pick that up, and maybe if you want to have a few extra words to add to your report. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Lucy Donaldson, Station Commander for Annandale and Eskdale, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Yes, availability has been very high throughout the whole of Annandale and Eskdale, despite COVID issues. As you can imagine, we've had to change the way that we were working. We've also had to deal with personnel either having to isolate or have deal with the virus itself. Gretna had a bit of an issue during the reporting period, but I'm pleased to say that due to practices that have been put in place and additional personnel being recruited, that's starting to ease now.
Okay. Thanks, Lucy, for that. Any other members want to ask any questions about the report or raise any observations? Archie, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. First of all, I agree with you. It's a good report looking at the what's actually happening, Lucy, and really pleased to hear that Gretna is getting the resource that is required in that particular area. I just wanted to say well done on what's been happening over the past couple of years. One question, that obviously the new fire alarms system, smoke alarms and heat alarms and carbon dioxide alarms, are you finding any issues with that at the moment?
I understand that there's a national issue, and I can see why you've raised this as a concern, but locally, Dumfries and Galloway, and especially Annandale and Eskdale, we have no issues to report. The community action team are working hard to make sure that stock levels are available. Messaging is starting to get out, I think, to the public now after all the recent press. So locally, we haven't seen any major issues, and we're still working hard towards keeping the community safe and working towards the Scottish Government legislation.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks
Thank
for
you.
raising that, Archie, because it is something that we have asked about at this committee over the period as this rollout has commenced. So obviously it's reassuring to hear that we're actually on top of it and responding appropriately to the requirements of the legislation. I don't actually see any other hands up, and I'm quite content with the report as it is. So if we're happy enough, unless there's any sort of late questions, we can go to the recommendations. Obviously, we've been asked to scrutinise the report, but are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Lucy, for your attendance today. Quite an easy ride this time. So that takes us on to the next item, which is item 5, Economy and Resources 6 months assessment of business plans, performance. So here we have quite a lot of detail, but in terms of figures for food distribution during the pandemic, which was some 193,000 meals to the most vulnerable people in our communities, which is quite staggering, really. It's a great response, augmented by the efforts of the community groups and volunteers, as we're well aware of throughout our area, providing food throughout Annandale and Eskdale and beyond, which really was a great response at a time when it was most needed. I'm also pleased to receive updates in relation to strategic housing and the work with development partners who will realise a total of 300 high quality new affordable homes in the area, and we were able to see some of that in action, and I appreciate Archie was there as a housing convener to present in Annan just the other day there. Members, do you have any questions or comments on this report? Archie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just again to agree with what you said about all these community groups and the food parcels and all the work that not just the groups but our communities coming together over the last couple of years and supporting those that are more vulnerable than ourselves. I think you're right about the housing side of things, and we can all look forward to seeing more new housing built in Annandale and Eskdale and further afield, of course. And thanks to yourself for coming along to that 300 opener as well, Chair. But it's just a comment rather as a question.
Thanks, Archie. I should probably have properly invited Simon to maybe speak to the report. Is there anything you want to add? Obviously, there might have been a few bits of information have come to light since the report was written. Over to you, Simon.
Aye, thanks, Chair. No, there's nothing to add. Obviously, I'm here to answer any questions that I can. If there's areas obviously outside my expertise, I will take those away and obviously seek sort of answers for members and come back as soon as possible on that, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. I can see that there is a hand up somewhere. Sorry. Thanks, Stuart. So, Councillor Ronnie Tate, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 45, item 5, it's just about the core paths. I don't know if Simon's well aware that we lost core path 278 in Langham, the Gaskell Walks core path, and it was a very, very, very popular walk actually. And I'm just wondering if there's any updates on, having a new walk along Gaskell's. I know there's been some problems with landowners and that sort of stuff, but it's been going on since November now, and I'm just wondering if there's any updates on a new core path being put into that area where Gaskell's Walk core path 278 was before.
Thanks, Ronnie. Simon, is that something you can help with?
Aye, thanks, Chair, to yourself. Yes, I think Councillor Tate's obviously identified that there are a few issues, obviously, with negotiation with landowners and trying to obviously look at the most appropriate sort of route, just given the terrain and obviously sort of the issues, obviously, with some of the, I suppose, sort of issues we've experienced, obviously, where we've lost Gaskell's Walk to obviously landslips and everything else. It is something we're looking at, but obviously I haven't got any updates in terms of where we are at this moment in time. But obviously it is something we're aware of the popularity of that path in the past, and we'd like to obviously try and put something in to replicate that in the near future.
Thanks, Simon. Does that help, Ronnie?
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a few points, some comments, and I think a question. So the first one on 3.6.11, Annan Regeneration Town Centre Plan. It mentions 2 projects that we've submitted applications for, and I think there's a little bit more progress on those. But it does just mention the Annan Town Centre one, so I think it is worth noting as well, though, because this could affect a couple of wards in Annandale and Eskdale. Is the second one is for the potential feasibility study in a coastal path cycleway from Gretna to Powfoot. So I just wanted to kind of flag that up, because obviously that there was an opportunity back in the early 2000s for Sustrans, when they were developing National Route 7, to do a coastal path there. And I think now with the decommissioning of the MOD, I've got a meeting tomorrow with the MOD. There's the potential now to actually, there was a couple of kind of pinch points. There's a couple of areas where it wasn't possible. I think Tordoff Point was one. So I think we could probably make progress on that. So it's really just to welcome those 2 applications that are in at Sustrans, and I think they're further down the pathway now. On 3.6.3, it's the Magnox, Annan and DG12 grant scheme. I think it says due to COVID, the Magnox grant was extended to the end of December 2020. I think that's maybe a typo error. There has been further extensions now, and I think it's up until the 30th September 2022. And it says there that there's been no applications, but we now have had about 10 or 12. Appreciate that this report is for the first half of this financial year, but we now have about, I think, 2/3 of the 75,000 that has been allocated, and I think there's about 6 applications pending in the Annan and DG12 grant scheme, which should take us to the total of 75,000, and that's match funded by new businesses and businesses that are expanding in that region. So that's good. It was really just, I really just wanted to put on record, it's mentioned here, but during COVID, I think we've all experienced that people have, been restricted, and when they've had the opportunities, they've enjoyed the core path a lot more. And that has led to, a higher value on pathways and the network that we have in Annandale and Eskdale. And I'd just really like to thanks for, the way that they've maintained those core paths and tried to improve them as well. I think that's greatly appreciated by the community, especially as there has been more use of those. So it's really just to record my thanks for that. That's me.
Thanks, Sean, and I hope that can be taken back to the teams working on that, Simon, because obviously we have realised the benefit of the pathways, and indeed maybe got to know a wee bit more about other agencies such as Forestry and Land Scotland, and all the people who help clear the paths after storms, for example, and things to that effect. I'm just wondering, should we appreciate the reporting period for this is then obviously supplemented by additional information about projects to try and bring us up to date. But Sean's just raised that point there about the end date of the Magnox scheme, so I don't know if we can just correct that in our notes of the meeting. And just maybe about the applications that are now in. Obviously, the reporting period is up to September, but a lot's happened since then, so that's good to raise that. I don't know, Simon, if you can add anything just about the path situation in terms of where we're at now with that, in terms of the development.
In terms of the coastal path, Chair, that Sean had referenced.
Yes, thank you.
Aye, thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have historically looked at obviously sort of feasibility studies and work, obviously, sort of progressing all the way from Gretna all the way around to Cairn Ryan to create obviously a full coastal route for Dumfries and Galloway. That obviously, as Sean sort of indicated, wasn't feasible in the past due to a number of pinch points, the MOD site, East Riggs being one of those. We are hoping, obviously, that sort of through the funding that is available, we can look at sort of creating that section from Powfoot to Gretna to obviously give a bit more a bit more sort of options in terms of people's exposure and interest and enjoyment of the countryside along the coast. So it is moving forward. The team is obviously sort of working and prioritising, but I'm aware that obviously Richard Masters, our access officer, is very keen to obviously try and establish something on the ground as soon as possible.
Can I just come back on one thing I forgot to mention as well? It was just, and again, it was just thanks to the department for getting Beckfoot right of way open again. There is a problem with part of the area. It's very boggy, and I've raised this with Richard, and I just wonder if there's any plans to actually do something more substantial to actually improve that, because there's an area that is very boggy on the new path that's been created, and just wondered if there was going to be any more work done on that.
Yeah, over to you, Simon.
Aye, thanks, Chair, and through yourself. Yes, we're obviously we're aware that the path went in, and obviously to the standards, but given obviously it's multi-use, we're aware that obviously parts of it have obviously suffered slightly and are obviously a bit eroded and a bit boggy. We are obviously monitoring and looking obviously at where we can put some additional aggregate in to obviously bind that surface a little bit better, and we're hoping obviously we'll be in a position to try and undertake that during the drier months this year. Thanks, Simon. Sean, does that help address that?
Yeah, and I forgot one final point as well. It's just more of an update, just with regards to 3.62 and 3.621. It's just that the progress has been made on looking at what kind of organisation and regeneration steering group will be. And I think there's probably a final meeting tomorrow, but I think we've decided to go down the SKIO option. So that's just really an update from that. But the meeting tomorrow will probably finalise those details.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate. I mean, members may have attended the seminar recently just about what was happening in Annandale and Eskdale, and of course that regeneration steering group did come up as part of the workings of that. So that's probably helpful progress, because I think it's had certain arrangements in place for an awful long time, and maybe they did need a look at and a wee review. So that's encouraging as well. So thanks for that, Sean. In terms of the recommendation of the report, I don't see any other hands up, but obviously we've considered and recognised some of the successes for economy and resources. Is there any aspects that we feel we need to refer back to the relevant future committee from this report, or are we content to go with the recommendations? I'll take silence as being consent and contentment. Thanks very much, Simon, and thanks, members, for your input into that one. I'll move on now to item 6, which is the Education and Learning Director's 6-month assessment of business plans 2019 to 23 performance report by Director Skills, Education and Learning. So it's good to see that 10 performance measures are all on track or within acceptable limits, although 6 are only reported annually, and that of the 15 agreed projects, all are either completed or on track. As per paragraph 3.11.1, national performance data was published at the end of February, and an area level report will be emailed to this committee thereafter. Members may want to note that the exclusion rate in our area has increased slightly, albeit it's still below authority targets, and that attendance of looked after children has improved slightly. I was delighted to see Beatwick Primary School achieved a Gold Rights Respecting Schools Award, and was the first school in our region to achieve this level, with many other schools in the area working through this scheme. Well done to all involved in that initiative. Jim Brown's on Teams today to answer any member questions or address any member comments. Jim, is there anything you want to add to the report first before I open up to members?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. Over to you, members. Any questions on the report? Archie, do you want to come in?
Yeah. So thanks very much here, Jim. Thank you for your support and what you do with supporting me and my other role in the armed forces side of things with cadets and all of that as well. Just the one issue, I think, and then you'll be aware of it because I sent you an email last night, was the situation in Gretna. I do believe that there are more people coming forward who want to join the school class, and I know that the report is going to Education and Learning Committee on Thursday for the 2 new temporary classrooms, and I'm just wondering, you know, to raise it and make sure that will be discussed, and the opportunity for that to happen now rather than have to wait. I do see a problem if we do have to wait, and it's mainly to do with supply of equipment and things like that to get the temporary accommodation up. So I think the sooner we get that done, the better. But it's just just something for myself to ensure that will go forward tomorrow. Obviously, it'll be on the recommendation of the members in Education and Learning.
Thanks, Archie. Jim, do you want to try and address that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, May, thanks for your comment there, Councillor Drybrough. I also did read your email this morning, so I understand the detail you've given within that, which you haven't necessarily spoken to today, and I do understand the case you're making very clearly. And yes, there will be further discussion, but thank you for bringing that up again. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've now got, I think, Sean Marshall to speak first, then Richard Brodie.
Thank you. Hi, Jim. I've just got one kind of question. It's really just maybe seeking your views on how we feel, because obviously during this reporting period, we're still affected by COVID, and there was periods of remote learning, and I'm just wondering how you feel remote learning has went. We even last week, we had most of the week was the pupils were working from home due to COVID staffing issues, and certainly some of the parents did raise with me they were concerned about the quality and quantity of learning material provided compared to them normally attending school. And I think there was a number of parents from S2 pupils, and if you think S2 pupils probably have been most affected because COVID started when we were in P7, so they missed most of their P7. They didn't get a proper transition, and then there was further disruption when they were S1, so they're in S2 now. So I'm just wondering, there's obviously concerns there about remote learning and what we can do to maybe improve that, and especially when we have situations that spring upon us quite quickly, like last week where we were forced to shut. I think it was S1, S2. I'm not sure, it might be even other pupils at the academy for probably all the week.
Thanks, Sean. Jim, are you able to help with that? Because obviously it's a challenge that a lot of the schools are facing whenever they have to close like that.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, Councillor Marshall, absolutely right. It's a hugely important point, and you put you identified exactly the issue, which isn't about necessarily what learning away from schools has been like when we've known that that's been for a longer block of time, when people have got into habits both at home but also our education staff have been able to focus on that mode of working. It's, as you said, when just at the moment with this latest COVID, we've had very quick or very short notice of school closures because of staff absences, and of course schools are doing, I should say schools are really working incredibly hard to stay open at all costs wherever possible, but of course we have to make sure that we've got appropriate numbers of staff in front of young people and that the learning is as good as it can be. And so yes, you put your finger on the point here, Councillor Marshall, that when it's really short notice, how do we ensure that we keep the quality, and you said quantity and quality of work, at a suitable level? And I think perhaps the best thing I can say to you, Councillor Marshall, is in you raising this, that is very helpful to me to go to schools to say, can we make sure we review when we have these unfortunate situations that are unavoidable and are absolutely not what schools want, not what I want, but when we do have them, what are our contingencies and how can we ensure that the quality is kept? You will no doubt agree with me that what we all want is for young people to be in the buildings face to face with our excellent practitioners. That's the model that works best. And so that's why I said, with great reluctance, sometimes we have to, but your point is well made that we need to make sure that when we don't have that opportunity and at very short notice, we have to then close certain year groups, how do we maintain standards? And I am in touch. Every head teacher has got an education officer who reports to Alistair Young, who reports to me, and we do look at the quality of this. You're absolutely right. At the moment, we're living in a very, very variable economy, and we need to make sure we've got the a sense of that quality and quantity at all times. But thank you for the comment.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Sean. Councillor Brodie.
Morning, Chairman. Good morning, Jim. I remember a conversation of a number of months back at the Education Committee where I was saying that Dumfries has a great deal of investment in the school system and a great deal of thought and discussion about modelling the learning town, etc., for that part of the region. And I got a commitment from the Education Committee that there would be a discussion at the committee and discussion locally with Annandale, Annandale and Eskdale councillors about shaping the future of education in this part of the region, as well as obviously other parts, the western part of the region, having the similar discussions. So I think I haven't seen the Education Committee, but it was promised that there would be a report and would be discussions, because it's important that we look at how we deliver education in Annandale and Eskdale and throughout the region, and see how it meets the needs of our young people going forward. I think at the meeting I said that Ann Academy, for example, meets the needs of a lot of children, but it doesn't meet all the needs of all the children there. There's a substantial number of pupils who could do with more vocational training, more science, technical, engineering, and mathematical support to meet what is required in the modern world after they leave school. So I think we need to have that discussion and come up with a plan how we want to deliver education in Annandale and I would like to hear how we're going to take that forward.
Thanks, Richard. Just before you come in, Jim, because I think we did have what was effectively a sort of Network East type approach, where the sort of main secondary schools in Annandale and Eskdale were trying to work together to deliver, effectively an Annandale and Eskdale equivalent of a sort of learning town, if you like, or something appropriate. And I think we would probably welcome that report. Maybe that's something we should consider as something to feed back to the relevant future committee in terms of this is exactly the type of thing we need to know in Annandale and Eskdale about how we're going to deliver for the future, given the challenges of geography and the different rural elements. So is that something you can respond to for Councillor Brodie and maybe pick up as a piece of work going forward?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your comments, Councillor Brodie. Nice to see you again. I think we're in a very interesting time, and this is absolutely at the centre of the question. We have got a number of national documents. You'll know the UNCRC, which has driven the Rights Respecting Schools piece of work, which you've commented on, BTUC, and we are pushing that very strongly across Dumfries and Galloway, so we become rights respecting. That articulates with things like the Morgan Report, All Our Learners, which is saying across Scotland we have had, if you like, structure, process and pedagogies and approaches that have done very well for certain youngsters, but perhaps haven't met the needs of, as it says, all our learners. We've got other areas like the Promise in terms of our some of our most vulnerable young people. So there's an awful lot of policy landscape around how do we make sure that this service meets the needs of every child. That includes what you're talking about, I believe, which is, if you like, curriculum models and making sure that we look at our local economies and say, well, what is the need locally? What are the jobs? Are we actually, both locally and nationally, are we building curricula offering, if you like, starting in the senior phase in terms of what qualifications can be achieved, but then strengthening that through the entire piece from early learning onwards, and articulating with My World of Work and the Young People's Guarantee. So I think this is the question, isn't it? How do we make sure that our schools meet the needs of all our learners, irrespective of geography, like you said, Chair? We already have significant progress in some areas. You'll be aware of the South West Connect, the advanced higher provision, and that has been very, very successful. And what that's meant is, for the first time ever, we've got geographical equity in terms of the access to a rich range of advanced high courses. Now, that is absolutely not the be all end all. We need to move that forward. We need to make sure, as you've commented, that there are not inequities simply because of where you happen to live. Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that even when I started at Annan, we sort of 6 years ago or so, 7 years ago, we had one suggested approach to this, which was a group of schools grouping together to try and get economies of scale and to look at the questions I've put to you just there. And I think what we're now looking at is, given that we've had 2 years of operational based working because of the pandemic, we're emerging, and those questions are still there, and we have been working at them, like I said, with South West Connect and other approaches. And now the point is to look at all schools and say, how is it that your curriculums, your processes, your learning approaches, learning and teaching approaches, the relationships, how do all of these things meet together to ensure that all youngsters have their learning needs met, not just in terms, and I should say, not just in terms of whether it's a vocational course or not, but that there is a good reason to stay on to school after compulsory school leaving age, for example, and that actually those relationships mean young people feel nourished and respected and valued within our buildings. So I think you've asked a very, very relevant question, and I can say to you that we are absolutely, that this is the big thinking stuff around in education at the moment. In terms of local solutions, which maybe are bespoke given local contexts, I'd be more than happy to meet with yourselves if you wanted to understand how the schools in Annandale and Eskdale are going to approach this. But I will need to obviously to speak to the secondary ed teachers to get their understanding of what their individual local approaches are.
Thanks, Jim. Richard, do you want to come back?
Chair? Yeah, thanks, sir. Yeah, well, I appreciate what James is saying there. Obviously, I've got lots of feedback from parents and teachers, and they've got ideas which they'd like to throw into the mix. I've got my own ideas of how we could play, perhaps we've had a classroom model where kids sit in the classroom most of the day for hundreds of years, but it's not really meeting everybody's needs, and we probably need to provide more out of class experiences which are more meaningful to children who are not really got the mindset to sit in the classroom all day. I think we talked about kids sitting in rows. I think at the education meeting there, and we had a bit of discussion about that. When I was in the last Annandale Academy, they're still sitting in rows, but probably that's because of COVID. Perhaps they'll get into more of a informal setting when the rules relax.
Chair, can I come back with a couple of points on that, please?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I will never say that, for example, sitting in rows is not sometimes the most appropriate way of learning. That might be particular to the task that has been planned by the teacher. It could well be, as you say, that perhaps that's been seen more now because of the impact. What I would draw your attention to on the specific item you mentioned regarding the potential for using the outdoors far more, we have brought paper forward which has a policy within it regarding outdoor learning. So we now have got a position in terms of outdoor learning and supports for staff available within that. So I would wholeheartedly agree with you that we need to make the best use of our beautiful landscape and an area in Dumfries, Galloway, and try and ensure wherever possible that we can use that to support the learning and well-being of our young people. So we're already moving forward in quite a lot of these areas, Councillor, but like I said, we are on a journey here, to use an oft overused metaphor, and I'd be very keen to listen, to meet with you by all means, and listen to the voices that you've collected from a variety of community members there. Many thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And we'll certainly look forward. We'll maybe set up a meeting in May if I'm still a councillor, and maybe not, even though I'm not a councillor, because there's still something which I'm passionate about. Obviously, the outdoor learning is very good, but there's also community settings where you indoor community settings where, like working with the Harbour Group, which Stand Academy's done, so some more of that would be really good.
Thanks, Richard. And I think, yeah, the point's well made. I think, you know, whatever the new council looks like after May, I think the offer of having that conversation with elected members in Annandale and Eskdale about what the sort of educational offering is, or what it can be in terms of providing what you talked about there in terms of geographical equity, about access to the courses or activities that can be delivered within the Annandale and Eskdale area, and of course what sort of pathways that allows then to the world of work or other positive destinations. I think these are I think that conversation does need to happen, and I think it would be well within us as an area committee to send that back, perhaps either as an operational or a performance matter in terms of what comes back to a future committee at this area level, because obviously the regional policy has to make sense at this locality area. So I think it has to, something would be welcome back at this committee, perhaps just to outline, maybe after a conversation with elected members, just about drawing together the head teachers' views and parent groups, student groups, etc. Just to sort of bring something in the form of a report to say that, well, this is what the curricular offering looks like, and these are the pathways for learners in Annandale and Eskdale. And it's then something we can maybe pick up and review as time goes on. I don't know if that's appropriate, but it's certainly something I'm sure we'd like to see at this committee in future. I don't know if you've got any comment on that, Jim, or if that fits in with your thinking about it at the moment.
Yeah, I'm mindful of if you like, stepping over the operational accountability of individual teachers and the way they describe their curriculum models for the local context. Like I said, I'm very happy to meet with you if you like to bring together the voices, and I think you'll obviously have a lot of, as Councillor Brody said, the voices of parents and others and teachers to help give an idea of some of the detail around this and some of the desires around this. I think what I don't want to do is to start managing for individual schools who've got extremely effective leadership teams, but I'd be more than happy equally to talk to those head teachers to say this is something that's very much in the front of our thoughts now in terms of how we make sure our schools meet the needs of all our learners, particularly with regarding the Morgan report. And I think it's perfectly relevant that I'm a conduit to help understand from yourselves what the voice in communities is. I think head teachers will also know well, but I don't see any great problem with me also meeting with you to understand from your own perspectives what you're hearing. I think possibly the best thing to do, Chair, if you're happy with this, is to say, well, let's do that, and rather than promising things that might not be relevant for down the line, let's do the first thing, which is to meet up, for me to have a conversation with head teachers, and just to get a sense of what the lie of the land is right now.
No, thanks, Jim, and I appreciate that there's a bit of a balance in that between the autonomy of head teachers, which is quite right and proper, and also that equity of access to things. And sometimes it's not necessarily within the scope or gift of a particular head teacher to do that within their particular school setting, although that doesn't stop them from finding other creative solutions to provide very useful activities and learning opportunities. So yes, absolutely. I think obviously we'll take up the meeting offer. I think in terms of the recommendations, I'm not seeing any other hands up, but that's maybe something that could go under 2.3, which is or should it? I'm not sure. It's maybe more of an action than a referral in terms of performance. So is that something, can I just check, would that be captured? Is that yourself, Tracy?
Yes, Chair, we'll record that as an action in the system, so Jim can take that forward and then we'll report back.
That's helpful. Thanks very much. Members, I can't see any other hands up, and Jim, you've been very thorough in your responses, so that's been really helpful. With that then, can we go to the recommendations? We're effectively been asked to note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Happy with that?
Agreed.
Thanks, Archie. Thanks very much, Jim. Okay, that takes us on then to item 7, which is Communities Directorate 6-month assessment of business plans 2019 to 2023. Performance 1st of April 2021 to 30th of September 2021, which seems so far away now. So I'm pleased to see this report covers some very specific information disaggregated for Annandale and Eskdale. It's worth noting the significant increase in activity undertaken by staff in environmental health and trading standards during this period to provide support and guidance to businesses in relation to COVID compliance. In addition to this, the account of the work done on visitor return and the support given to our communities and visitors to feel safe was also significant. There was significant change during this reporting period in terms of the introduction of new curbside recycling service, which I think is almost ubiquitous and normal now. The volumes of recycling collected in Annandale and Eskdale in the first 6 months was significant, and again I would like to put on record our gratitude to the team on the successful rollout and for being able to iron out a few very, very local issues about where bins go, etc., which thankfully seems to have eased off now. We've got Harry Hay, Vlad Valiente, Stephen Herriot and Liz Manson on Teams, I believe, hopefully, to answer any member questions or address any member comments. Is there anything to add to the report? Harry, your face appeared first, so is there anything you want to add to the report?
All right. Nothing to add, Chair, from my perspective. Thanks very much.
And Stephen Herriot?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm just messing up my microphone there. So over to members. Any questions or comments on this report? Archie?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. It's one to Stephen actually, and it's and I see that Stuart Haven's also on the thing as well. Obviously, some of the issues that we've had over the last couple of weeks at community councils is the road defects and how we're going to take forward, you know, having a better system in place to cover these road defects and potholes. I'm sick of saying the word pothole and listening to the word pothole at community councils. Annandale and Eskdale, of course, has huge numbers of large vehicles coming from either timber or quarries and things like that. And then obviously there is the issue with regards wind farms as well. Stephen, I'm just wondering if there's anything going to be done. I mean, there was discussion a while ago about, you know, ensuring the first time fix in potholes. I want to give you an example of the discussions that I've been having in community councils. In Eaglesfield, one of the community councillors met with a roads guy who was filling in a pothole in Ashgrove Crescent and said, you know, why are you not doing the couple that are next to this pothole that you're doing? He says, I've got 5 bags of coal tar for 35 miles of road. Now, it's not the best response to from an operator. And I know the operator is doing what he's basically told, but I'm a bit concerned that the first time fix issue is not being addressed properly. I've also got some issues in Ecclefechan with regards work with the rail services in the bridge underneath Kirkconnell Hall. If you know where I am, Stephen, there's been, well, I know that Stuart will know, and I know that Mike Fox understands that there are a few concerns of the fly off to Ecclefechan and the road up to or should I say under the railway bridge at Ecclefechan as well. A lot of the rubble falls down from the railway line and causes blockages of the drains in the thing. And this of course causes road defects. So I'm just wondering if there's any discussions ongoing at the moment.
Thanks, Archie. And straight to the local there, I think. So good to have you on the call, Stephen, and whoever else can help address that. But is that something you can pick up and deal with for Archie?
I'll just respond on that, Chair. Yeah, I have to do that, and then I'll maybe bring Stuart in just for some of the detail in terms of a better knowledge of the kind of the local areas and specific areas referenced there. I think we're kind of coming out of winter here with, it's a time of year where we see a lot of roads defects manifest themselves just with the kind of some of the cold weather impacts and also the heavy rain and the kind of washouts and the kind of damage to the surface. So it is a time of year that we do tend to play catch up a bit on the roads defects. I think we were also coming in, and it was kind of recognised through the road service review, a high level of defects anyway in terms of the need to increase the investment. And we have the Roads Recovery Fund, 2.4 million over the 3 years, and we're just at the end of the first financial year on that in terms of spend, and also the administration allocating an extra 960 related to cost increases in materials. But we are and have agreement to apply that to effectively top up the Roads Recovery Fund. We're doing quite a bit of work. Stuart's got teams on the ground, and I know he can maybe talk a bit about that, about where they're going in Annandale and Eskdale. But effectively, what we're trying to do with the Roads Recovery Fund is go in and blitz an urban area in terms of deal with all the defects on a first-time fix permanent basis. And we will be, we've got a contractor just about to come on stream to accelerate that programme as we come out of winter. That's maybe taken us a bit longer in terms of making sure we're completely procurement compliant, dealing with some of the issues we've had on procuring in terms of costs of road materials and how we get that, get contractors in a place where they're comfortable with the rates that they're submitting. But we are moving that forward. We'll also look at appointing a second contract to deal with the spend and 960 additional allocation, and that will give us a bit of acceleration and a boost as well. And I know in the west and the east we're looking at bringing in jet patchers, if you're familiar with that piece of kit, where we blast with high pressure air the defect clean or free of rubble, and then blast in emulsion and aggregate and then a mix to achieve a kind of repair. So we are looking at stepping up and adding to the resources that we have within the road service with external contractors. We have a dedicated technician who's kind of overseeing that and moving ahead in areas where we're going to mark up the defects to be repaired, both by our internal and external contractors. On the issue, our aspiration and our goal is first-time permanent repair, but what we're finding is we've got so many defects that we need to do the temporary fix in order to get safe, and we will always take that approach in terms of road safety first. And I think we'll probably see a bit of that going forward. I think if we get to a position with this additional investment and over a number of years, we get on top of the problem of the problem of what's coming out of winter with a significant level of defects, we will, more fully we'll be able to go to the first time permanent repair, but we'll always have that backup and fallback in terms of the temporary fix to make safe. So I think hearing what's been said about resources and the kind of comments that came back in that particular instance, we're obviously bringing in extra contract resources to try and get on top of the problem, and appreciate in terms of road condition in Annandale and Eskdale that can be that is, in terms of the numbers of defects, that is quite high. Stuart, do you want to just pick up on any of the kind of specific cases there mentioned by Councillor Driver?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Morning, everyone. Just to pick up the first time fix issue that was raised there by Archie, with I assume it's a technical member of staff who's out on his inspections, and that's where the bags of material come from. The inspectors have a supply of bags within their vehicle when they're carrying out inspections, and basically they're knocking off the worst of the potholes that they can on their inspection just to make them safe, as Stephen's already alluded to. It is the material that we use is a recognised first-time permanent material. However, we don't use it in that vein. We're looking to come back to actually do a permanent repair on that. So it is a temporary repair, but it's permanent. It actually has a classification of a permanent repair mechanism. So I assume, without actually knowing the full details and speaking to the members of staff involved, in an inspector, Archie, who is just knocking off the worst of the potholes that he's coming to on his inspection. unfortunately can't carry a lot of material, so he probably only has 5 or 6 bags in his vehicle. I would agree with you, the response isn't great. I'll speak to the guys at the next team meeting about how they conduct themselves and how they speak to members of the public when they're being asked questions. If they're not comfortable answering some of the questions that they're getting from the members of the public, we do have the contact cards with the council details on it, and they can be passed to members of the public. So we'll make sure that's happening as well if they're not comfortable in answering the questions for members of the public. The network rail issue at Kirkconnell Hall, we're currently dealing with network rail on a number of issues, and we're finding it quite difficult. There seems to have been a large turnover of staff within network rail. A lot of network rail engineers have left and went back to, they were in, a few of them were in local authorities, and they've actually went back to local authorities. So I'm struggling with network rail. I have got one point of contact that is still there within the organisation, and I'm continually chasing him for different answers, and to be honest, not really getting a response. And he's the main engineer for the West Coast mainline area. So I'll continue to work on that. As soon as I get information on the issues that I'm dealing with on the network rail side, including the Kirkconnell Hall underpass railway bridge there, I'll come back to you on that, Archie. Stephen alluded to some of the work that we're doing with procurement at the moment with regards to the additional £960,000. Contract documents are sitting with procurement at the moment. The strategy document is signed off by ourselves. I think it's waiting on director's signature and finance officer's signature. The timescales for actually having boots on the ground for that, shall we say, we're looking at mid-May. That's when we're looking to bolster. I think that the main issue there is the spend is so big, it's a longer and protracted procurement process, but we started work on that as soon as we got notification we were getting that additional funds, and it's ready, the contract's ready to go to the market.
Okay, can I come back, Chair, on one question, but I see Gail wants to come in on that same point.
Yeah, so if it's okay, Gail, do you want to come in quickly, and then I'll go back to you, Archie, and then Richard's waiting to come in after that.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, because I'm not going to repeat what Archie or Stuart have said just now. The rail bridge has now been swept, and it has made an immeasurable difference, absolutely immeasurable. It shouldn't have taken a year for it to be swept, and I think that when local members come forward and say, this is a really easy fix, please get it done, that we should see it getting done. And I have to say, it's almost completely, I mean, it will need resurfaced at some point, but it's almost completely removed the problem for now. And we had a regime there where there was a regular sweeper that went through Ecclefechan and on its run did the bridge and kept the gravel clear. I think Network Rail used to compensate us for that. Regardless, it's a really easy fix. So thank you for getting it done, but I shouldn't have to shout about it for a year. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Archie, do you want to come back? Thanks, Gail.
Yeah, the final thing is on resource and assets for road. And I remember a few years ago I was up in Dumfries and the multi-hog system was actually trialled. My understanding is that you're talking to the company about multi-hog systems. I'm just wondering where you are with that.
We've talked to a few companies now with specific pieces of plant, looking at the actual patching operations. Unfortunately, I would say that we cannot take them up on any procurement process. The cost of these machines is extremely prohibitive for the revenue budgets that we currently have, and also for the capital fleet budget that Gordon has as well. To invest in these, we would need certainly additional funding out with the funding that we've already received, which we're grateful for. One of these vehicles, for instance, is going to cost in excess of, say, £110,000 to £130,000 just for one. They are good vehicles. They're slightly more productive. However, we're still, if to invest in that, we would still need to invest in the other resources that we have, which would be boots on the ground, to be honest with you, Archie. we could increase the productivity using one of these machines, but we've still only got the same resources filling in the defects behind it.
So, thanks. Chair, I just wonder if there's an opportunity here for the area committee to actually ask communities to look at funding. And the reason I'm asking that is we did put a lot of money into the waste system to buy new vehicles and things like that. Now, that's proven quite successful. I think the equipment on the roads, which I'm used to seeing in places like Apsey and Aviemore and things like that, fantastic opportunities. I think if we had more vehicles like that, the small sort of benefit that Stuart's talking about can be increased tenfold if we had 2 or 3 different bits of equipment for that. So I'm just wondering if we could actually ask communities to discuss a way forward in that respect.
Yeah, Archie, I mean, I'm happy to look at that when we get to the recommendations in terms of feeding that back to the relevant service committee to make a sort of financial request. I'll maybe get a wee bit of guidance about how best to phrase that shortly. But before we get to that, just on members coming in, I think I've got Richard and then Sean, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, any investment in equipment which will make us more efficient and get the potholes done is welcome. Because every year we spend a lot of money in one financial year, but the time March comes, the potholes have reappeared after all the rain we've had and the frost. So it's 2 steps forward one year and then 2 steps back. And more people getting their tyres burst locally, especially in the road to Chapel Cross, I've heard, and more people disgruntled about the potholes in their streets as well. So any investment is really welcome. I'll just report a conversation, meeting one of the community council attended at Clansfield. General consensus of the community council there is that the pothole reporting system isn't working. That the reports are made, but you don't get any feedback. There's no feedback when the potholes are going to be done, and they're in the system for months and months without any feedback. So I raised that with Derek Crichton when he came to visit Annan and his ward tours. So I think we need to look at that system and see how it can be more customer friendly and give more feedback to people so that they see that we're actually doing stuff.
Thanks, Richard. I mean, I think all members will have experienced that and the sort of slight change in response from the reported system. And I think, to be fair, it's almost the sort of perfect storm really for the roads department, given a combination of factors to do with COVID, restrictions on working, procurement, increase in costs, etc. You know, there's so many. And already just not having enough, even though the resources might be there, the people maybe aren't for various reasons. So it's you know, I think we're well rehearsed in all the reasons why things aren't perfect. But hopefully, and in light of Communities Committee yesterday, where we've got the programme of work for the next financial year, which is welcomed, and there'll be a lot of familiar roads in that list, if you like, which constituents have been reporting. The Roads Recovery Fund, I believe, is separate to that, so that's the one that Stuart's maybe touched on. So we did also hear at communities yesterday really about that local members, it would be helpful if we were maybe informed on a weekly or sort of basis. So we kind of, and again, it's maybe down to manpower or person power, but if we could at least get a heads up, I think it was Sean that had mentioned this, just about where the team's going to be, so that we can sort of manage expectations of the local communities. Whenever the RRF team or the carriageway repair teams are sort of in place. Yeah, there's a lot of things in there, but I don't know if you want to respond to Richard's point directly there in terms of the reported system. Stephen Herriot, your hand's up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, yes. On the reported system, we're aware we're working with quite an old system and it has its limitations. And we are going through an exercise with colleagues in Business and Technology Solutions supporting us to look at an overhaul, and we procure the software packages around about the kind of works management for roads, so that we get that better connection back into the customer management side of feeding back on the defects. So that is a work in progress And I think Councillor Brodie suggested that should be a project, but it is a project that's progressing, so that we get that better closing the loop on reporting back and what we do with the defects. I think it's also a bit of a challenge in terms of the existing system, in terms of what I said, but the volume of defects generates a lot of customer reported defects, and as we get the number of defects down, you know, the volume we're managing should get better as well. In terms of the discussions at Communities Committee yesterday, that was very much the capital programme, and what Stuart's been talking about in terms of the Roads Recovery Fund is the kind of additional revenue funding that complements that and deals with the reactive repairs.
Thanks, Stephen. I think Sean, were you going to come in next?
Yeah, thanks. Just a number of points. Just touching, Richard mentioned one as well specifically, but I think Stuart's well aware of it. It's on the C43, just past the junction with the B63557. Stuart has had a team in to kind of patch part of that area, but that whole there's a section that's degraded so much that I'm just wondering if there's going to be like a more permanent solution to that, because it's still a bit bumpy. Can I just say a couple of with regards to the bin recycling system? I think that has been a successful rollout, and also I think in East Riggs we now have our bin recycling system, so just thanks for the team for that. I think it has been well received across the communities in Annandale and Eskdale. There was an issue, and I know Nicola's on this call as well. I just wanted to confirm that obviously we get a lot of requests for drop curbs, etc., and there was a programme, a small budget set aside for drop curbs for people, you know, disabilities, etc. So I'm just wondering if we still have that limited scheme in place, which tries to tackle key routes in towns and villages and areas where, you know, a drop curb. I know that certainly any new developments, etc., they come with drop curbs, and whenever the council are doing renewing pavements, they offer that service of dropping the curbs. But that's just a question for Nicola. Yeah, Stephen's touched on at the communities yesterday, and I think it was part of the roads review we done that, and Mike Fox responded to it, but it's just there's a lot of that. You'll probably see it as officers, but we get it in the neck as members, and we also, you know, when we're on social media, you know, one of the main topics is about potholes, etc. And I think part of the road review we did suggest that, and I think Mike thought that there was a week list being sent out, but it is handy, apart from the programmed works, the capital works that we do, it would be handy if members got just, and I know things can change, but just where the pothole squads are going to be in each week, and I know that that's quite fluid, but that would be helpful, and you know, because we can proactively support the work that the council has been doing. We've talked a little bit about the blitzing programme, and you know, the patching and the pothole and the first time fixes, and certainly I think the way that we're tackling that has been really good. It's identifying, you know, moving from community to community, and I think it's still in East Riggs at the moment. And you know, I've been talking on and off with Stuart, and he's doing his utmost to try and then. But it would be handy to see what the programme is for Annandale and Eskdale going forward on where they move to next. And I totally appreciate as well, though, that you know the roads have got resource issues, but also there's been redeployment, you know, due to, you know, storm damage, etc. And there's also been the COVID issues. So it is welcome, but it's the stop-start that hopefully, if we can start, hopefully get a good steam ahead of us, and we can start, you know, moving on through the communities in Annandale and Eskdale. And I think that's all I've got.
Thanks, Sean. Well, there's a few things in there. But certainly one of the actions, I think, which probably just to emphasise on yesterday, would be some way that local members can be informed of, you know, when local patching squads are going to be in particular localities. You know, however practical that could be made, because it does give us the heads up, and people do respond to that. In terms of the dropped curbs, I know that there's been a bit of a reorganisation, if you like, so that I think it's now Tony Toppin as Road Safety would take the lead on that, because I think previously there had been bits of budget and some relationship with Swiss Trans put some money to do some interventions. But I think that's kind of sort of transitioned across, if you like, to a new structure, I understand, but maybe Stephen can come in and maybe explain that. But yeah, so if we could maybe pick up some of Archie's points there, Stephen. Sean's points, I beg your pardon.
Sorry, yeah, glad to do that. Yeah, I think in terms of the weekly list, we do prepare quite a bit of information. I'm just not convinced from yesterday's Communities Committee discussion that that's getting to members with the same kind of frequency that we're preparing that. So we will look at that as an action. In terms of where the patching crews might be, I think what we can do and what we certainly do in that weekly list, the data I see pulled together, is we do say whether the Roads Recovery Fund, so they kind of, we know we've got the planned patching in advance, what locations they're going to be in. And I think the data's there and it's collected. I think we just need to make sure that we're getting that out to members on a weekly basis. So that's, I've started to ask the questions on that, and we'll follow that through. In terms of the dropped curbs, I'm not aware of any sort of kind of significant budget on that, but I can have a discussion with Tony Toppin in his role as team leader for kind of network management, road safety, how we handle that. But again, it's something, it's probably very much linked with our kind of active travel and looking at crossing points specifically. And there's a lot of different pots of funding there, a lot of that external. So I think maybe, you know, if there are requests for drop curbs, they could come into the road service, probably direct them at Tony's team, and we can look at that from an active travel point of view. We have done in the past audits of some of the major urban areas and looked at the kind of accessibility routes, and on the back of that, we do looking at the active travel strategy. We're also developing the delivery plan to come back to the service committee after the elections in terms of an update on the active travel strategy and the delivery plan, because we have identified through that process a lot of asks and projects that can spin off on the active travel side. So we would pick up the dropped curbs and accessibility through that process. I think that leaves the C43, and I'd probably bring Stuart back in on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Marshall, the C43, yeah, obviously we're well aware of that because we have quite a bit of correspondence from yourself and other members of the public. What I'm looking to do with the C43 is we're looking to address that under the additional funding that we're currently procuring at the moment for a permanent solution to that issue between the B6357 and the junction towards Chapel Cross.
Brilliant,
So,
thanks.
It's definitely on the radar.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure that'll be welcome news. I can't see a hands up, but I do have a couple of points, if that's okay. Sorry, no, Councillor Tate, Ronnie, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I've been listening to the discussion right now, but just for instance, the recovery fund, what gets relayed to the members by the officers, you know, it sometimes suggests that they're coming in next month, and it never happens. And then it'll be the following month, and then it never happens. And we as members, you know, I think Councillor Marshall actually highlighted it, we get it in the neck all the time, and we just relate what we're getting related to us to the community at large, actually, and it doesn't happen. You know, some of these things goes on for months actually, and it becomes a wee bit of a joke at the finish, really. And another thing also, we're all well aware that, you know, it's reported in the papers that Dumfries and Galloway have got a backlog of £217 million, you know, of potholes basically. So, you know, this idea at £2.4,900,000 is going to be very, very difficult to eradicate the amount of money that needs to be spent on our roads. And, you know, I think really that we should be looking at, you know, whether the council, through whoever, COSLA or whoever, really has to lobby the Scottish Government far more on this point, or we're just going to get it in a worse state. The roads are going to get worse and worse. I personally have never seen the roads across Eskdale as bad as they are right now. So, you know, I think we do need a discussion on this, and we do need some hard talking actually. And the only way that got to resolve this, I think, is you know discussions with the Scottish Office on this, on the budgetary processes. Okay, Stephen, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't know if you want to respond to Ronnie's points there. Stephen, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I completely appreciate what we've been saying on the Roads Recovery Fund, and I think the expectations we've kind of raised around that. And I know the particular situation we're talking about in Annandale and Eskdale is that we've prolonged the work in East Riggs, and I think we've probably had a bit of project creep. I'm kind of pushing the team to give a kind of commitment as to, we'd always said we're going into Langham next, and I think we've probably slipped that date a number of times now. But I think effectively, however far we are in the particular area we're working on at the present in A&E, the intention would be to move into Langham, and Stuart's advised that can happen from the 11th of April, so that we will close out the works that we're undertaking in the kind of East Riggs area that have run on. And I think this has maybe been part of the in terms of the pre-programming, we've probably found that there's a lot more work we can do in an area that it is taking longer, or we hadn't factored in the fact that we're doing, and less so now, kind of winter response, and it's the same crews we're taking off to be on standby for winter gritting. And when we're not using them in winter gritting, we're getting them on to dealing with roads defects. So I think in terms of Langham, that's the plan in terms of mid-April, that week, the 11th of April, to get in there. And I think we just need to stand by that date, given that it's slipped a few times already. I think in terms of the figure that was reported in the press about the £200 million plus maintenance backlog, that's a different thing. That's not an evaluation of the cost to repair all the roads defects. That's the kind of annual figure that comes from the annual Scottish Road Maintenance Condition Survey, where a significant part of our road network is assessed by an independent consultant contractor for the Scottish National Project. The data gives us the road condition indicator, which is an LGBF, local government benchmarking framework indicator, that we have to report on. And from that survey data each year, they calculate what the maintenance backlog figure is. And what it is, it's not just pothole repairs, it's actually about resurfacing roads or surface dressing roads to get them up to a good condition on that kind of national indicator. So that's more about the long-term capital investment in the roads, and it's not an evaluation of what the cost would be to repair all the defects. It's actually an evaluation of what the roads need to maintain their structure and their integrity going forward through the years. And I think we do take the chance, any opportunity we have with Scottish Government, to lobby on the kind of maintenance funding side of the settlement. But I know we always get the kind of the feedback and the pushback that's for local authorities, that, you know, the settlements are made. It's not ring fenced. It's for local authorities to decide how they spend their revenue grant allocations.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think, yes, just on the last point, it's one of these things where officers and members alike would be, as part of their duties effectively, is to do that very thing, which is to lobby as much as possible on behalf of their particular locality to get the resources needed to deal with the issues they're presented with. And it is a constant challenge. So I think we just have to continue in that vein and make the case as best we can to change the minds of those who can make those decisions. And so it goes on. Archie, do you want to come in on that?
Not so much on that, Chair. I just, thank the officers for the responses to the road stuff and things like that. But I didn't want to get Liz and Harry halfway anything, not saying nothing on this particular committee meeting. So the first one is to Liz, probably on 3.1, 3.2, with regards the elections and casual vacancy elections in community councils. I'm just wondering, Liz, if there, is there a sort of view across the region that there's potentially lower numbers of community councillors coming forward, and is there an increase in sort of resignations? Because I'm kind of finding that in the ward at the moment, but I don't know what it's like across the rest of the region. And for Harry, it's about the use of indoor facilities for sport and leisure. It is quite low down in this particular, but are we seeing an increase now?
Thanks.
Better with regards to the COVID situation.
Sorry, you just cut out there a wee bit, Archie, but Liz, sorry, do you want to come in, Liz?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so as I'm sure you all know, that community councils there's sort of ups and downs across the region. I think we've had one or two who have recently become established that had been disestablished for some time. But I think you're right about there's always just sort of a pattern of sort of ups and downs about that, but I don't think we're seeing anything significantly different. And indeed, one of the conversations that we've been having with third sector is about the big increase that we had in volunteering as a result of COVID, and the good work that's been done, particularly by community resilience groups. It's perhaps about trying to turn some of that into community council participation, so that we can get that next tier of government supported and enhanced. And indeed, there's work going on at national level arising from the local governance review about just trying to sort of breathe new life into community councils. So nothing particularly dramatic, I think, but of course there is the usual ups and downs in community council membership. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And I actually did name check you, Harry, so I don't know if you want to provide any additional information for Archie.
Quite happy to do so, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Driver. Yeah, obviously, as has been said earlier, this particular reporting period is 1st of April to September 21, when we were still very much dealing with the impact of COVID directly. Now, really, I guess it's twofold. For the duration of the 2 years, that either Scottish Government guidance was that we couldn't open a facility full stop, so therefore people couldn't use it even if they wanted to, and then obviously on an individual basis, people perhaps chose, simply because of their own personal circumstances, not to use a facility. They're possibly either underlying health conditions which would perhaps make them slightly more vulnerable, or that they were having to isolate, etc. So as hopefully members have seen, the service worked extremely hard to keep in touch with previous service users and perhaps come up with more innovative and creative ways that they could still perhaps exercise, for example, or participate in some form of physical activity in their own homes, or support them to give them programmes, etc. So looking at the current position, I'm glad to advise that the trend is certainly upwards for both dry and wet leisure provision, and understandably it's something that the leisure and sport team at the moment is working very closely on, to make sure that we're picking up any trends, emerging trends, etc. So yeah, absolutely, the gap between pre-COVID and the current situation has narrowed significantly, which is brilliant. But we're not obviously wanting to rest on our laurels. We're wanting to continue to look at and evaluate what customers are wanting and what we can offer. So that's certainly something that we're looking at constantly, Councillor Driver, and making sure that we can respond to those needs moving forward. But the trend is certainly upwards. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Could you say one more thing, Chair, if it's all right? And it's about Saturday, which is the Freeman Parade for the RBLS. If members haven't responded to their RSVP, can you make sure you do so? Because we need to know how many people are coming for food and seating arrangements in the church. Thank you.
Thanks, Archie, and thanks for the reminder. I know a couple of members in Annandale North are attending an event for the Syracuse Scholars, so it's a wee bit of a clash, but I do appreciate other members have got a chance to respond to let them know if they're attending or not, and that would be much appreciated, so thanks for that. Just on the subject of volunteers, obviously I think we have seen the trend that people are happy to volunteer and have come forward in their numbers, particularly where they can see a direct impact for their contributions, if you like. I think community councils will always have that. They've got a slightly different role, so it's sometimes I know some community councils have been sort of keen to encourage volunteers to come on, but I think people are often motivated by a particular issue or a project, whereas community councils tend to be there in the longer term, and they do have that statutory function as well, which isn't always as sexy as you're really doing something immediate for your community. So, but yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. Just on that, and it was a couple of points I did want to make. Moffat Community Council last night spoke to their efforts to itemise and sort of take pictures of all the sort of potholes and road defects in their community, which I think they've tried to supply to our team in terms of the Roads Recovery Fund project, because they're, I suppose, as much as Langham is looking forward to the RRF team arriving there, Moffat is has again been sort of, I think they're next in line after Langham, so they're sort of as keen to see that that team sort of progress as well. But they've done quite a lot of local work to sort of say, here's where all the problems are, in effect to try and help the council maximise their efficiency when they get there, so they know where to go and they don't have to, you know, duplicate work in that regard. Is that something that we can sort of continue to link up with so that they can provide those details, is one question. And I think Stuart sort of disappeared from the visual field here, but certainly in and around Heck and the U56A, there's been quite a lot of repeated attention put on that, and I know we had a site visit there, but maybe that's something that we might see in a future notification about where the patching squads might be, because that's certainly been a concern as it gets used as a diversion route when the B7020 or other roads are closed nearby. So I'll just take this chance to be a wee bit parochial there. But aside from that, is there anything that we can pick up in terms of the Moffat situation there and the work they're doing as a local community? Stephen?
Yeah, what I can say is if you pass the details, if you give them Stuart Caven's contacts, we can pass them on to our technician working on this, is Ross McAlorum, but he's kind of looking at all the programming, and it may assist in the work he's doing, and it depends on the level of detail and how geo-referenced they are. But it's certainly a piece of work Ross will be doing it to, when we move to Moffat, we'll be looking on the ground and marking up in terms of what needs to be done. So any information they're pulling together, photographic records that are geo-referenced, if you pass them to Stuart or give them Stuart's contact details, we'll get them onto the technician looking at the programming. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. I will do. And I think I can't see any other hands up. There was one point just on the comment made about Network Rail earlier, and I'm just wondering, is that something that we need to maybe escalate a little bit in terms of if they're having organisational issues or permanence of staff issues? Is that something we need to make representation at a higher level in terms of speaking to Network Rail or the relevant office that deals with that? Because if Stuart Caven's reporting difficulties at the level he's needing to operate at, then maybe there's things we need to take further at a higher level, and I'm just sort of wondering if that's something that we need to consider. Stephen, I'm sort of looking at you in terms of having a bit of seniority in that respect, but is that something that you would be having a conversation about with your sort of equivalent number, as it were, in their organisation?
Certainly, I'll chat with the road service, and if they're saying it's an ongoing problem, if they give me details, I can raise it through Transport Scotland, who have oversight of some of these functions, and see if we can get kind of better traction with them on some of the common issues. Thanks.
That's helpful. Okay, I don't see any other members' hands up, so if we can go to the recommendations. Just a wee point of note, actually, 3.11.3 makes a reference to Wigtonshire. I presume that's just a copy and paste error. So just on behalf of the team here, just to capture that in the notes. So as we go to the recommendations, we've been asked to review 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Obviously there's quite a few things we've discussed today, but if we're happy to agree that, and also I think we were minded to request to the Communities Committee or the relevant committee to provide additional financial resource to procure specialist equipment that could increase the productivity of local road repairs. So that's something that I think there seems to be a bit of sympathy for, and wherever that gets taken, that would be helpful. Harry, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to the fleet and plant query, members on Communities Committee will hopefully recall that we did a bit of a review last calendar year just in relation to that particular asset class, capital asset class. And as a result of the budget development process, the budget has increased. But it's always constantly under review in terms of lead-in time, and we do work very closely with services, including Stevens, just in terms of almost coming up with a kind of cost-benefit analysis of the capital spend versus what impact it's going to have operationally on the ground, including with revenue budgets. So certainly happy to keep that dialogue going with Stephen's team, and if there's anything that can be done in terms of reviewing that, very happy to look at it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, I mean, I think even if we record it as this is what our area committee feels, then obviously it can be taken forward in the appropriate way. Archie, got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think we've also got to remember that there's an environmental impact as well. We need to look at our carbon setting, and if we have better equipment that does this work faster, then there's an environmental impact as well, which is a positive thing.
No, absolutely, and it goes without saying. Obviously, we've got a fifth priority, and I think we have to consider everything under the auspices of that. So that's well reminded. And just the other thing was the action. Again, I think Stephen, you'd committed to this, but just about for local members to be informed of local patching squads in terms of the RRF, or just how that can work, because I think we are sort of asking for that, and I think obviously on the back of yesterday's meeting and today about how best to pick that up and clarify what's going on with that would be helpful. But with those, then, are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for your input today on that one. So you're now released. Thanks very much.
Many thanks.
That takes us on to item 8, which is the report covering the performance monitoring information received from organisations in receipt of discretionary. Sorry, I'm just getting some advice from Stuart there. Yeah, sorry. In terms of the information received from organisations in receipt of discretionary budget from this committee in 2021-22, it's important that members receive monitoring information to know the impact of these funds, and it's helpful to see included some of the images that help to bring the accounts of these projects alive. There's good examples of how this committee works with local groups and organisations to bring benefits to large numbers of people in this area. I've got to my right Stuart Hamilton, who's also on Teams, and he's here to answer any member questions or address any member comments. Stuart, I don't know if you want to add a few words in the first instance, just to speak to the report before I hand over to members.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to add, following publication of the report, there were 3 further applications that were approved following consultation with members and the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee. So at 2.2, the recommendations, there'll be 43 local projects or initiatives that have been supported, with the total awards at 87,121, and then therefore at 3.12, the remaining budget is indeed 19,109. So it's just an amendment to those figures following publication. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. So those are the figures live in real time. Archie, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I should have said this in declarations of interest. Obviously, in one of this report, we have the Veterans Breakfast Club, which was an application by the Royal British Legion Scotland Annan branch. I'm in the Annan branch and applied. So whilst it is an application for a grant for the Veterans Breakfast Club, it had to be done through the Royal British Legion Scotland because they're a charity, the Veterans Breakfast Club, aren't they? So although I would declare that interest, I don't think it's appropriate for me to leave any meetings in that case.
Thanks for doing that, Archie. And I've got my sort of chair's notes here. It says it's entirely a matter for an individual member to determine if they have to declare an interest, and if so, whether or not they need to leave the meeting during the relevant item. So I appreciate that you've done that, and it's completely within your gift. With that, then, any other questions on the report itself before we go to the recommendations?
087 is.
Archie again.
Yeah, can you just come back in here and just, the fact that the small grants have helped so many small organisations within Annandale and Eskdale has to be seen to be a good thing, and unfortunately we haven't spent all of our funding this year, which is a bad thing. However, we do have the opportunity to take that forward to next year and give the opportunity for these small clubs to come again. I think the amount of people that they've actually benefited from that has to be a good thing for the area committee. and the staff that have been involved with that. All right, just to basically say well done to everybody who's been involved.
I was going to say
Thanks, Archie.
the same. So here.
Thanks, Sean. So did you want to come in to say here?
Yeah, well, I was going to say the same as what Archie said, just that, I mean, it has had a wide impact and, supported loads of organisations, and there's a lot of work behind the scenes to process these applications. So big thanks to the officers involved, and, it's made a real difference in Annandale and Eskdale.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks, Archie. Yeah, no, it's absolutely been...
Here.
So, yeah, thank you. I think it's well recognised. I think that we've done quite a good job, and obviously there is that wee bit left over. But as Archie says, we can carry that forward. I think we've probably seen. I don't know what the rate of uptake by small groups is, but it's certainly getting used. And I think as more groups become aware of its availability, the applications do come in. And to be fair, there was quite a chunk of money that we did allocate into that fund. So. It could be that we just take that forward as per the recommendations. The third recommendation. So with that, I don't see any other hands up. Are we happy to go to the recommendations and note the performance monitoring information? Note that approximately 33,000 citizens have benefited, with the corrections there in terms of 43 local projects and £87,121 being invested. And 3, agree to close the small grant fund and carry forward the remaining balances into next year as outlined in paragraph 3.6 and 3.12.
Agreed.
Thanks, Archie. That takes us on then to item 9, which is Area Committee Discretionary Budget. So this follows the Council budget setting and asks us to note the allocation of discretionary budget to this committee. And also we're asked to agree to allocate funding for our key civic events and to agree to invite expressions of interest to deliver these. Again, Stuart is still here in person and on Teams to deliver or to answer any member questions or address member comments. Stuart, do you want to add anything to the report?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to amend the figures again, so at 2.2, taking into account that reduction of 3,000 in terms of what's being carried forward, there's a budget of 99,324, and that's reflected again at 3.3, where those figures are 19,109 remaining in the budget, therefore 99,324 to carry forward. I would add that this is the first year post-COVID that we're looking at funding the signature events and riding of the marches, and therefore the recommendations revert back to the previous priorities of the Area Committee and to the pre-COVID levels, which would normally be discussed at a member seminar, but owing to the local government elections and the timing of these events, it was felt appropriate to bring it forward to the Area Committee for consideration at this time.
Thanks, Stuart, and appreciate, normally we would have that seminar. Just in terms of any new council, we would obviously have a seminar after that. What sort of time of year would that be?
Once the new council is formed and the relevant committee is established, I'd be happy to organise a seminar to discuss whatever remaining budget is available. Obviously, there's decisions for this committee to make today, and should there be budget remaining, we can, as soon as the committee is formed, we can programme in a member seminar to consider the priorities for that remaining budget and then bring forward a report.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. So I'm sure members will appreciate it. We're kind of where we are in terms of timing with elections and whatnot, so there is a bit of practicality to this. Are we happy to, well, firstly, any questions from members? Archie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's just a question on the elected member ward capital things, Chair. It says on page 130, previously allocated to support organisations operating within the priority area identified to achieve a specific outcome to be determined beyond the May 2022 local government elections. I think it may be prudent upon us to say that, I mean, I believe that the ward capital allocation for each of the members in Annandale and Eskdale supports not just small organisations, but it also supports some of the capital works that that help, for instance, sustainable travel and things like that. So I don't know if it's possible today to suggest that whatever the funding was, I think it was 16,500 if I remember right, something like the ward capital is included in this going forward.
Thanks, Archie. I think, does it revert back to what it was before COVID? Because I think we increased it at one point, but I don't know if Stuart, you can maybe clarify that for Archie.
Yeah, prior to COVID, the budget in previous years was originally £1,500 per elected member, and then owing to budget reductions within this budget, members took the decision to reduce that to £1,000. Then during the pandemic, over the course of those 2 years, there was available budget, so that we reverted back up to the £1,500. Therefore, if you're reverting back to the pre-COVID levels, it would be £1,000 per elected member, but again, entirely up to elected members whether they want to have £1,000 allocated per member or the £1,500. That would normally be discussed through the member seminar and to inform a sort of recommendation to committee. I think if members wanted to take the decision to allocate either the £11,000 or the £16,500 for that purpose, that could certainly be done, and then post-election the allocated amount per elected member can be identified and relayed appropriately.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if that helps, Archie. I mean, it's one of these ones where we could decide that today and then have to change it later, or we leave it as it is just now and then change it. You know, because if we change it from what it is in the report, it has to come off something else effectively. So, I mean, I'm in the committee's hands really about that. It's sort of academic in a sense, but I don't know if that helps at all.
I'm just sorry, I'm just looking at the discretion budget available for future decision is £29,636 at the bottom of that page. I think if we had a seminar after the election, members would want to do a little bit of what they've done before in Annandale and Eskdale, especially with 11 members getting that amount. I would suggest that we do put. And I think £1,500 per member, helps a lot of different organisations within their ward and specific projects within that. So I would suggest that we do the 16,500 now, so that the members then can start thinking about where they're going to spend that. But I'm happy to sort of wait.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy to support that, to be honest. But I mean, I'll see what the views of other members are, if there's any particular strong view. But happy to go along with that if other members are so minded. I think, Sean, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. The one thing I would like to say, I've no problem with the priorities, but I think, Stuart, there's probably an amendment based on, I think John Wilson Electrical does the Christmas festivities now. Well, I think there's a lot more work in East because they've extended the lights, so there's lights right along the main road. So I think the figures there that you have would probably do with being updated based on the costs that were charged by the contractor for 2021.
Thanks, Sean, and I'll hand over to Stuart, because I know I've had inquiries from, for example, from Johnson Bridge, for example, who are wanting to explore what they can do, but obviously they're not on the list at this time. But it's certainly something that I think we need to get a proper report back that actually looks at. I think they're very traditional figures, and I think it's maybe about time they get looked at again. But I think, Stuart, you've got the knowledge on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall. I would absolutely agree that the figures relayed there are historical and come from previous contracts, and the reason why they're itemised within the report per community is so that we can determine two communities that are organising the erection and dismantle of Christmas lights, if they go above that budget, that they have to then meet the outstanding sort of balance that they owe the contractor out of their own funds. Having said that, I have had conversations with the contractor over the last 2 years, and certainly in the last couple of months, just around about his experience, and particularly the experience of some of the community groups during Christmas 2021, and having had discussions with the chair around about additional communities, particularly Johnston Bridge, noting an interest to install Christmas lights through local fundraising, and their desire to have their community included in the erection and dismantling. My plan was to undertake a bit of a review of the associated budget and bring that forward, but unfortunately, due to the timing of this committee and not been able to have that member seminar. We have to revert, I have to revert back to the previous priorities and allocations, but I think it's certainly something that I have noted and certainly will undertake that piece of work in future years so that the figures reflected are updated and are accurate. And having said that, I think the contractor has worked very closely in the last 2 years with with all of the communities. There has been very positive feedback received from the communities about the contractor, the work of his staff and the costs associated. And the contractor has certainly kept to a very bare minimum any additional costs that he has passed to the communities during that time. He has reflected that it is proving more challenging to keep within that budget. And that is certainly something I would be looking to have a discussion with the contractor and the community groups over the course of this year so that I can bring forward a report in future years that's a bit more accurate about the costs being incurred by the community and the support that's given by this committee.
Thanks, Stuart. Sean, I don't know if that helps sort of fill the picture out a wee bit in terms of detail, but are you happy with Stuart going forward with that piece of work? And then we can maybe take a better decision after the election, if you like.
Yeah, happy with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Sean. Any other comments from members before we go to the recommendations? I can't see any. So with that, if we go to recommendations, which is to note there's a 312k in the council budget for area committee discretionary budgets. To note that Annandale and Eskdale is now 99,324 as detailed in the paragraphs, but with Stuart's amendment there, and agree to allocate funding for the key projects initiative in Appendix 2, but to alter the ward capital figure. So I think we just need to adjust the figures for that. If members are minded to agree that, then happy to go along with that and adjust the figures accordingly. Do you want to come in on that? Or? Yep.
Yeah, so I think you're agreeing to update the Appendix 2 to include ward capital budget totalling £16,500 to be allocated to each elected member post-election, and that will leave 10,136 for future decisions of this committee.
So if members are happy with that, can we go with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
That takes us on to item 10, which is disposal of land at Blacklock's Fennel, Loch Maben, report by Head of Economy and Development. So this relates to the disposal of land at Blacklock's Fennel, Loch Maben, which we first heard about, I think, at the Loch Maben Common Good Subcommittee. So we expected to see it at this committee. So Andrew Maxwell's here on Teams now, I think, to answer any member questions or address any member comments. So we have the report in front of us. Anybody want to ask any questions on this one? So nothing coming up in the chat. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add to this or say to this report?
No, just, well, one thing that I do need to add is that as it's common good, I have to put on a section 104 Community Empowerment bracket Scotland Act, notice of intent to dispose of land for any representations on it. So that's for a period of 8 weeks as per the common good disposal policy.
Thanks. I'm sorry, my bad, but I think I should have asked members if we wanted to agree to withdraw delegation from Lockerbie and Loch Maben Common Good Fund Subcommittee, just on a technicality. Can we do that, members?
Agreed.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, Andrew. Yeah, so and you've just outlined there the steps that you then need to take to go forward. So providing there's no other questions for members on that basis, are we happy to go with the recommendations? Adam, do you want to come in?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Sorry, I was a bit late there and put my hand up. I think just obviously sort of the ward members had an informal discussion about this at the last Common Good Subcommittee, and I think just to kind of put in the public record and to ask Andrew, you know, I appreciate there'll be the consultation that's done, and I think it'd be worthwhile us trying to be as proactive as possible in doing that. I think at the Common Good Subcommittee, I had sort of referred to the fact, obviously, it is quite a narrow sort of lane down there, if you like, and there's a number of sort of residents and businesses around there. So I think obviously going through the proper steps, but I think actually even just sort of sending a letter to the sort of residents and businesses sort of in Blacklock's Fennel would be an appropriate step to take. I imagine one of the things that might come forward is that this piece of land has been, really informally, has probably been a bit of a turning spot and things like that. And I think it'd be quite handy just to make sure that residents and community and businesses are given an opportunity to sort of make those representations to the council prior to us completing this process.
Yep.
So
do that. Yeah, I can consult with the local businesses and the residents along Blacklock's Fennel to inform them, send them out a letter to notify them.
You happy with that, Adam?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so with that then, and just that additional communication with nearby residents and businesses, are we happy to agree with the recommendations?
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Andrew. So any other business deemed urgent by Chairman due to need for a decision? I've got no urgent business. That effectively concludes the meeting, but could I just thank everybody, including those in the room, so Stuart and Tracy and our infamous tech team, who've stood up to the tests that have been presented to them, and also to the team behind the area committee, so Joanne Scott and all the other officers who've helped with preparing papers and all the rest of it, and just all the members of the committee for the hard work over the period of this committee, and good luck to whatever you're going to be doing in the next few weeks and whatever happens after May the 5th. It's been good to work with you, and hopefully we'll continue to do so in some shape or fashion. But thanks members for all your input over the years. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks to you too, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.